right, Mary, it is 11:45. Do you want to say hi to everybody,
please? This is going to be the shortest welcome ever, except for maybe Don Sullivan's greetings from the state board, which are always greetings. Thank you for coming here. Thank you, Brian, for being on deck. Kyle needs to teach, so again, always a wonderful thing when 10 really student-centered faculty get together, work with really excellent instructional designers, and put together the best possible learning opportunity for our students that they can. Kyle is here to share with us.
All right, thank you, Mary. Some of you know who I am, some of you don't. My name is Kyle Ferguson. I teach Comm Arts here. The class I was tasked to create was Logic and Argumentation, Comm 205. I'm not going to spend a lot of time digging into that class. My conversations with Angela kind of geared toward, hey, what did you get out of the whole process for best serving students? So that's what I'm going to kind of highlight today. But before I do that, I'll tell you a little bit about me. My background with Quality Matters, this is my second year at LCSC, so I've heard a lot about it coming in here. Previously, I worked in athletic administration in San Diego, and I also was an adjunct at a couple community colleges. The community colleges in San Diego talked about Quality Matters. They talked about ADA compliance, and I say that it was required because they talked a lot about it. And we did one training on it, and then I never heard anything about it ever again. And even full-time faculty, I'd ask them questions, and they would just kind of be like, well, kind of whatever. So for me, I had my Quality Matters QM ADA compliance mind blown being here because I thought I knew a lot about it, and turns out I knew virtually nothing about it. So today what we're going to really focus on is I'm going to talk about the process and not like get detailed into the process. I'm going to highlight what I learned from it, what I did well, and then some areas that I needed to obviously improve. Then my 3 takeaways were that Quality Matters makes the classroom accessible and consistent across the board. It provides clear direction for me as an instructor, but also clear direction for the students, which is ultimately the main point. And then it reminded me of my purpose, and I'll kind of highlight that more as we go in the process. So for me, you can't see Yoda real well here, but passing on what I've learned, that's kind of what my hope is here today for you guys. So with that, talking about the process as a whole, things that went well for me, the first thing that was really, I guess, eye-opening to me was the template itself. When I started getting into it, and oh, thank you. You can see Yoda a little bit better now. When I started getting into that, when you first log into Blackboard, this is my first experience at LCSC. I jumped into Blackboard, and I've used Blackboard since 2006, so I've used it for a while. I jumped into Blackboard, and it's just completely blank. And it's like, what am I supposed to do here? So then I figured some stuff out, and I found the templates, and I talked with my fellow Cornhusker Carrie here, and she helped me with that. She helped me get connected and figure out the template. But once I actually started using it and getting into the Quality Matters stuff this last summer, it really became clear to me how important the template is and how helpful it is across the board. So for me, it really went well using the template. The navigation of the syllabus and changing everything to make it ADA compliant, and changing the headings and the titles and the bold and all that type of stuff. It's tedious, but now that I've done it, it makes navigation of the syllabus for me a lot easier and finding things a lot easier, let alone for my students who actually need it. So just a little work up front has already made the process a lot easier for me, but I know the biggest thing is the fact that it's impacting students as well. Oh, course content. The course content really provided a clear direction for me, which I'm going to highlight here in a little bit, and also gives really clear content to my students as well. Things I needed to work on, it was really not a surprise for me. I said the details are the details which are detailed. I'm a big picture person. Details for me can be difficult. So going through the Quality Matters process, I knew this was a weakness of mine, but I appreciated it because it's dealing with my weakness and something I have to improve on. And it made me, not only for the class I'm doing here, it made me realize what did I kind of skip over in my first year that I could have really developed a little bit more? What are those little details that I may have missed? So it actually got me back into my traditional classrooms and the stuff I haven't gone through this process for, and I made some tweaks and some changes there. And then sending it to Angela, and then her sending it back, and then sending it to her again, her sending it back. Yes, the details were important for me, but it's something I needed to work on there, which made it very clear. So ultimately for me, the takeaways I got from it, and these are true, the setup in the template leads to clear classroom and a better learning environment. So not only a clear classroom, made it very clear for me because you can see everything, it makes it very specific and pointed, but for our students, it makes it a clear classroom for them. I kind of take a look at that blank screen beforehand. the blank screen beforehand where you walk in there and then you have this nice template where everything's set up and clear. The students know where information is. They know how to find the information. It should cut down. Hopefully, there's still going to be questions, but it should cut down on those questions for them. And I think it's a very important aspect that I didn't really pay much attention to before, but I'm very grateful for it. And the next one here is it leads to consistency across classes, which ultimately will lead to help the students and lead to impact retention and participation. The three things I kind of wrote down as I was thinking through this, I was like, okay, if it's consistent across the board, if we do quality matters across the board, all right, well, what would that kind of look like? Three things I kind of wrote off the top of my head is students would need less time trying to navigate each single classroom they go to. They pop in there and they're like, oh my gosh, I've never seen any of this stuff before. As opposed to sitting there saying, oh, I've done this before. I know where to find the next thing. I know where the discussions are. I know where all this stuff is. Less confusion between assignments and discussions. And then ultimately more comfortability in the classroom. They feel comfortable when they get in there because they've seen it before. So I think the consistency side of it, the more that we go through the process and the more that we do this as a whole, it benefits the students that way, and it's very clear. Next, it provides clear direction. I like to think of myself as Gandalf to my students, providing them the way. I probably think a little too highly if I think of myself as Gandalf, but the expectations of the course content show the students where we're going in the process of getting there. Again, I'm a big picture guy. So I can say, hey, this is where we're going. Okay, well, how do we get there? It's like, well, we're going to get there. We'll figure it out, right? No, the whole process and going through and the course content setup and the clear objectives and clear initiatives through the class show students, hey, this is each step of the way. This is how we're going to get there. This is the process we're going through. And again, it made me pull back and say, okay, in my traditional classroom, what does that look like? Stuff I haven't gone through this, what does that look like? How can I make those changes to again, hey, show my students this is where we're going, how we get there. And I guess the big thing for me as a former online student, I remember having classes that provided clear direction and those that did not. And it's putting myself back in my student seat and saying, yeah, it was a lot easier for me when I knew where we were going and how we were going to get there. And I need to keep that in the forefront of my mind. And then finally, ultimately, Keelan reminded me of my purpose. It's not about me. It's about my students. Right? That's why we're here. That's why we teach. That's why I love teaching, is I love the students. If the students do not or they cannot understand, are there ways for me to fix that? What can I do about that? And that made the whole process made me think through that. Again, taking it from the QM and moving it on to my other classes of, okay, if they can't or don't understand it, what can I do to fix that? And then finally, a big thing for me is the ADA compliance side. It's vital and we must adhere to serve our students. And the big piece for that is this semester I have 2 students who have told me they use screen readers. And these students are awesome, really engaged in class. And I want to do what I can to help them be successful. And it made me feel really bad about students in the past that I didn't do this for. And so I look at them and I'm like, what tools can I give you? Something, again, simple and a little tedious at first, but ultimately helps those students and serves those students. So ultimately, I've learned so much, and the process changed the way I present content online and in my traditional classroom. It reminded me what my purpose is and what it needs to be, and why I love to do it. And I'm grateful to Carrie and Angela and to the institution for providing this opportunity, because if this was not here, I wouldn't have done it. So the fact that I did it, though, has not only impacted this class, but my other classes as well. Thank you. Questions? Yes.
First, I want to comment on all the awesome gifts you have.
My students love them, so that's, I will say that.
I mean, other than the obvious changes to the syllabi, I'm just curious how you might have changed some of your face-to-face classes based on.
I think for me, it was more big picture, thinking through the details, and it comes back to, again, thinking through, okay, if this is an assignment, and this kind of goes back to something I was doing with Mary too, is thinking through an assignment or thinking through a project we're doing and saying, okay, from a student's perspective, how does this look? Like in my mind, like I said, I've used Blackboard for 11 years or whatever. I'm very comfortable with Blackboard, but putting them in that situation where they maybe never used it before, they don't understand. Or a freshman coming straight out of high school, I've taught this class 15 times. I understand the assignment really well. I understand what the end goal of the assignment is, but talking through that with them and being more detailed, again, getting to the details of saying, hey, here's why we're doing this, and also showing them there's value in this activity we're doing, rather than, hey, here's an activity to do. So for me, it was more thinking big picture of it and saying, okay, looking at those little details and thinking of the student again rather than on myself. That's good.
It's done the same thing for me.
Yeah.
My face-to-face classes with a little bit more scrutiny. And
Yes.
also just be curious as to why we don't have more of a formal QM for face-to-face classes as well. Not
Yeah.
bad.
Yes.
No, we were having that conversation. That's awesome.
For me, so I did not teach full time before last year was my first year, so it was very much a whirlwind in general. It's like, okay, I've taught the classes before, but when you full time doing it, really, really immersed in it, it was very different. So taking the time over the summer to kind of reflect back, and I made a bunch of notes throughout the semester, first and second semester, of what I could change and how I can improve it and stuff like that. But then over the summer, reflecting on it, tied in with this, there was a lot of things where it's like, well, I could do this a lot better to better serve my students.
So is this class live?
Spring.
In the
Yeah.
spring? Oh.
Yeah, it'll be coming spring. It's coming spring. Yep. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.
Oh, I got one. I do have one.
Yes.
Go ahead. You said that two of your students use screen readers. Did you know that before?
I did not, no. They both have mentioned that to me.
I wouldn't have any else.
Yeah, I know. I never heard anyone mention it to me in the past. So
Yeah, we have quite a few students who don't disclose their screen.
yeah, both these students they're great. They sit and ask tons of questions. Because they don't always get it, so they ask questions, which is awesome. So I'm like, hey, you guys should ask questions. But it made me feel really bad because I was like, I bet over the years, it's almost impossible for my students to even understand the syllabus. And then they end up, what happens if they don't understand, they stop coming, and they giving up or whatever. So for me, it was kind of big deal. Jeez, what have I done? But at the same time, I feel very blessed that I got going forward. Right.
So I'm Brian Detail. I think I know most of the folks here. This is my 8th year here at LCSC. It's hard to believe it's been that long. And this summer I completely revamped Math 123 online. We have had it online for a long time, and it hasn't been updated in maybe 10 years or so. When it was made, it didn't have any videos. It just kind of had instructions and worksheets and had the students read the books. And so it was pretty rough. It was really rough, I think. It was essentially, here's the material, go learn. And I wanted to sort of change that. I wanted to do some different things. And being as I've taught the old 123 online before, I've taught Math 130 online before. I actually made that course a few years ago doing the Quality Matters process. One of the things I've been trying to really pay attention to is what's useful for the students. What do the students actually use? And that's something I tend to really lose sight of. I come up with these great, fantastic things that I think the students will love, and when I check, they aren't really using them. If you don't know, the Blackboard, you have statistics tracking on Blackboard. You can see if students actually click on things, what they actually do, what they actually use. The first 2 years I taught online, sort of my philosophy was, the students don't have that face-to-face interaction. You can't really talk with them. So I want to give them the best feedback possible. I spent an unreasonable amount of time writing up their homework assignments, writing comments, elaborate comments, explaining everything. And then I realized I did a little experiment. I actually, on the homework assignment, I wrote, email me if you read this and I'll give you extra credit. And I think out of a class of 25, I think I had 2 email me. May have been 1. And I did that in another class, and it was about the similar response. So I realized I'm spending a lot of time doing things that the students aren't finding useful, or at least they don't want to utilize. Likewise, when I did the statistics tracking, I found that things that I worked really hard on, in particular, I made up some sort of worksheets, lots of examples, that sort of thing. They just weren't clicking on it. And so, I was kind of wondering, well, how do I get students to interact with these things? And so when I designed this course, I was trying to think more of, okay, how can I encourage, maybe force students to utilize some of these things. What I've done is, and I've done this with my other class, I basically sort of the standard Quality Matters setup, which is fantastic. But I have the course broken up into units. Each unit has has a video, usually multiple videos, and quiz. They can retake the quiz as many times as they want. That way they have to keep doing it until they get it right. And then they have a homework assignment. One of the things that I've done is the homework assignments, they have to actually write out a homework assignment. I don't allow any sort of like multiple choice type homework assignments or online auto-graded homework assignments. I've found, especially in math, a big thing is learning how to communicate, and students that have had online courses that are just, fill in the little box, type your number into the little box. They have no idea how to write up their homework. They don't know how to communicate their work, their mathematics at all. And math online is so difficult. It's so difficult. I can't imagine taking an online math class. That would be tough. I would have a hard time with it. And so I want to encourage students to use these things. The quizzes are a big part. And then the videos, so this is something new that something that I've done with this course I haven't done before is there's a website called Edpuzzle. I don't know, some of you may have used it before. No, some of you haven't. Okay. Well, that's one of the things I use with the videos, because I was wondering, how are the students using the videos? Are they using the videos? Because I spent a lot of time with the videos. Spent a lot of time captioning those videos. Are they using those videos at all? Does it matter? Are they getting? And if they aren't, they really should be, because how else are they learning anything? Are they just reading the book? I really wanted to get some more information, and so there's this website, Edpuzzle, and you can put any YouTube. Oh my goodness, I've been selected to become an Edpuzzle coach. So exciting. And so I wanted to learn more about the videos. What you can do with this site is you can take any YouTube video and you can put multiple choice quizzes, embed them into the video. And you can also, there's lots of options. You can force students so they can't skip around in the video. I would think that would be too annoying, so I didn't do that just yet. But you can, so if we have this one right here, it has a list of all the students. A lot of the students, for whatever reason, they made multiple accounts, and so those are ones that, but it shows if they watched the video, the percentage they got on the various quizzes embedded in the video. And so you can see there's 50 out of 100. There's only 2 questions on this one, I think, and so on. And there's a little check mark if they watched the video or not. In particular, what's particularly helpful is you can see with some of these, I'm just going to pick one at random that I think might have this issue. You can see what they do. It shows you what they watched, how much of the video they watched, and how many times they watched it. So this student in particular just answered the quiz questions and just watched a little bit after 5 minutes. Didn't even watch the video. You can see another student watched most of the video 4 times, watched the other in part 3 times. And so you really get an idea of what the students are doing. Are they paying attention at all? Are they watching the videos at all? Are they putting the effort? Are they putting in the time? When I get, it's going to be very revealing. Sometimes I'll get phone calls or emails from students saying, I don't know how to do this problem. I'm so confused. And then I go back and I see what they're doing, and they'll have just maybe like that one student where they just answered the questions, didn't even really watch the video. As far as grading, the way I've told them I've graded it is, because sometimes, especially with this class, Math 123, we have a lot of material that might be review for students that have seen before, and so they might not want to just watch the lecture. They might think it's boring. They just skip and answer the questions. If you get all the questions right, that's fine. You don't have to actually go through watch the whole thing. I'll give you full credit for participation. If you miss one or more of the questions, though, to get your full credit for participation, I have to see that you actually watched the video. And of course, they could just leave it running on in the background, but you can never tell. So I've had some successes, some not so successful things. I think overall participation is better with using this, I know. And I can identify the students that really aren't doing the work, the ones that aren't clicking on anything. They aren't, they're just sort of clicking on the video, answering the quiz questions, skipping to the quiz questions, answering those. Again, this quizzes, I can show you how the quizzes look real quick. I have a minute left. I'll do that real quick. Let's let's see. If we go, so watch as a student. I can listen to the Khan Academy-esque type videos that I sort of made. If you go through, and,
It sounds like it's gonna be
oh my goodness.
subject.
Let's see if we can skip over to, oh,
But as you'll see, it can get
how do I get the, let's hide that. I don't know how to, there we go. Scroll down. So you go, so videos, again, they're very simple, multiple choice. They don't have a whole lot of options. You can mix things up, but they don't have the options and nearly the flexibility that Blackboard does. So.
I love that question.
And so, I guess I'm out of time. Yeah. Well, anyway, I guess that's basically it. It seems to be helping with participation. At the very least, it's helping me know which students are really putting the effort, the ones that are actually trying, the ones that are actually, going through things, putting in some effort, and I can identify the ones that aren't off the bat, and I can give them a nice little email saying, hey, I've noticed you haven't really been watching the videos. It seems like you're struggling with the homework. Maybe we should talk and try to turn things around. And I send them that email, and they don't respond. Sometimes they do, and sometimes we can work on turning things around. I can also identify the students that are really putting the effort and are really struggling too, and those are the ones that I feel like I can hopefully help more.
Thanks,
Okay.
Brian. Do we have any questions, Brian? Michelle?
Yeah.
You said that you can make it so they can't skip towards the question.
Correct.
Okay. Have you alternated that?
I have, I actually originally, that's how I set it up when I was making the course, and then after I'd made the course completely, and actually when I submitted it for Quality Matters, it might have actually been like that. I would go through some of the lessons myself just to make sure everything was set up, working okay. And it's kind of really annoying because every time you want to watch the video, you have to watch the whole thing from the start.
Oh.
Yeah.
They want to refresh.
So
Yeah,
you
and
just
if they
wanna
want a
refresh, like, a few
refresher,
seconds.
like they want that one example right in the middle,
Yeah.
they're stuck watching the whole thing from the start. And of course, when I'm just checking the class, I just want to skip to the question, make sure I didn't screw up the multiple choice
Right.
question, that the answers are correct. And so I'm sitting there watching the whole video again. Oh, my students are going to have to do this too. And plus, a lot of the material, especially at the beginning, there's going to be some students that this is basic review for, and they probably don't need to watch the video, and I don't want to necessarily punish them for it. It's like the student that never comes to class but gets 100% on everything. I guess it'd be nice if they came to class, but they probably, if they can get away with that, I'll let them.
Very good. All right, thanks, Brian. The next topic.
I'm Heather Van Mullen. I teach in the Movement and Sports Sciences Division. I chose this was a very interesting experience for me and a very rewarding one. I'm actually teaching the class that I built for online face-to-face this fall. And similar to what I've heard Rochelle say, and also I apologize for coming in late to Kyle's session. I was coming directly from class, actually from this class, and it has remarkably changed how I teach face-to-face, which I did not anticipate whatsoever. So it's been a good experience. The whole time I was doing this, I was thinking about my role as a faculty member, but also my role as a division chair. I was trying to think as I was looking through this and working through this framework and thinking about becoming ADA compliant in how I teach, how to be very purposeful in how I engage faculty in a discussion about the value of this. As I try to encourage them to think about embracing some of these changes, because I often hear faculty sort of hesitant to wish to embrace it. So it was really good for me to experience it myself. The whole time I was doing it, all I could hear was Angela Meek in the back of my head, because really what she was trying to convey to me, which was really quite helpful, was just really about communication. We as educators are communicators on a daily basis, but when we take ourselves out of the live face-to-face, which so many of us are comfortable with, and put it into this sort of foreign online space, it changes how we communicate, whether we intend for it to or not. So the whole time I found myself thinking about inclusion. And I was talking with Dean Flores about this the other day, and as a sports scholar, I frequently use the the field of dreams analogy. If you build it, they will come. And so we hope that if we build online classes, we will get more students who wish for those experiences. But the reality is this: if we don't build inclusive online classes, students who need inclusion aren't going to come because they're going to know. If we don't build inclusive face-to-face learning experiences, students who need that environment in order to be able to effectively and efficiently learn won't come. So when I hear faculty say, well, I don't have anybody in my class who needs this, so why do I have to do it? My response now is, there's probably a reason there's no one in your class who needs it, right? Because they know it's not a safe space to come and learn in. And so the experience really drove that home for me. Inclusion, it really isn't about physical proximity. It's about intentional planning. It's about intentional effort. So all students can be successful, even those who might not even know that their learning style differs or varies. And this is where this really changed how I teach face-to-face. I wanted to, as much as possible, think differently about how I construct a community for learners to be successful. And so in an online setting, certainly when we're talking about QM or we're talking about ADA, I mean, these bullet points, if you will, became those sources of things to really focus on for effective communication. So, what does that look like really is sort of what I kept trying to think about. So intentionality became huge. Every time I found myself with making a decision, I asked myself the question, am I fostering readability? I mean, literally, what would Angela Meek do? Is all I could keep thinking as I was going through this process, because I could hear her voice asking me that question. I would come sit in her office and I'd say, well, what about this? And she'd say, now, wait a second, what's the focus here? And it kept bringing me back to that primary question. And it's because it kept bringing me back to that primary question that I knew that if I couldn't honestly say yes, I was on the wrong path. And I feel like that has been the most impactful thing to me. I had to relearn what it meant to create an engaging learning environment, both online and face-to-face, because it really started to impact the types of materials and the construction of materials that I was choosing to share with my students. So less really is more, unless, right, you're including an image, a graphic, or a picture. Sometimes I think it's easy, at least it's easy for me, to think that there are certain things that draw attention. And in fact, as I think about this differently, they're actually detracting from someone's ability to be able to focus effectively. So that transitioned into how I teach face-to-face as well. As I was thinking about this idea of best practice, really I was thinking about if I couldn't help but liken this to going through accreditation. I need to get somebody from point A to point B, and I want that experience to be as seamless as possible. So how do I best hold their hand and create a pathway for them to walk that allows them to have the best experience they can? If people enjoy the learning experience, they're likely to come back, which is exactly what we're after from a retention perspective. So Angela encouraged me to think differently about how I presented information in an online setting. So now I have 3 versions of every PowerPoint. I would have never thought that was a good idea, and now I do, because I needed to make sure that the PowerPoint I was using first had the appropriate backgrounds, right? Had the appropriate colors, had the appropriate fonts. But then when I think about how I include links, what link really truly is going to enhance the learning experience? Is it really truly going to make a difference? If the answer is no, don't put it in. But that might differ for a face-to-face class. Maybe I want to include it there, and I'm able to do so better because I can provide a better context. But then she also got me thinking about how students access information. And PowerPoint is one way, but if a student is learning on their phone, if a student is learning on their tablet, a PowerPoint might not be the most effective strategy from which to share information. So I started creating a variety of different versions of notes or discussion topics, so that way no matter what form of electronics they were using, they could access the material. And that then translated into how I posted things for my face-to-face classes, knowing full well that in a face-to-face class, a PowerPoint could be perfect, but if a student goes home later and only has their phone from which to work, that PowerPoint is not going to be all that effective for them. So I need to ensure that I also provide them with another mechanism. Again, this idea of walking them across the bridge. It takes a little more work up front on our part as a faculty member, but I think the payoff down the line is huge. The first slide I shared with you had to do with effective communication. In order for us to retain students, we have to prove to them that we're in their corner. We have to prove to them that we've got their back. And for us at LCSC, with so many students who are first-generation college students, we need to take the extra step, I think. I will advocate with my faculty now, having gone through this experience, to ensure that maybe a little bit more work up front actually has huge payoff down the road. Not just in the face-to-face, but in the online setting and the online structure. Because learning truly does happen everywhere. So some other best practices that were pretty impactful for me was the concept of the mini lecture. For those of you who've been teaching online for a long period of time, you're kind of like, well, duh. For me, who much prefers the face-to-face, this was a pretty impactful sort of lesson in how to make a meaningful change easily. I don't know about you, but I can only sit still for so many minutes before you lose me, especially if someone is talking to me through a screen. And so the idea of how we structure delivery to simulate that face-to-face experience became a powerful one for me. We might show a video in our class, but it's probably 5-7 minutes long, and then we break it up with small class discussion. Why wouldn't we do that in an online setting? And I think Brian spoke to that earlier with this idea of at certain points you stop, you ask them questions to check learning. So that also, though, made it easier for me to feel better about the time spent captioning. I'm a qualitative researcher by trade. What we do is we caption through transcripts, but it's an interesting process when you're trying to simulate that within a lecture as well. So in short, I'm really glad I had this opportunity. I'm thankful for it. It made me rethink a lot of things. And continually, I kept coming back to the same question. Will this increase readability? I mean, that's the question I kept coming back to. And now I think about that when I'm teaching face-to-face. Is this activity really going to make a difference? And if the answer is no, or if the structure of the activity is no, then I need to rethink it. And I need to try something different. So when I talk with faculty now about this process, I'm a huge advocate for QM. It gives us a structure. It gives us a path. And we're walking across it together. I designed my online Blackboard following this same framework. I get no questions about where things are. I have no questions about due dates. I have zero. It's phenomenal. It's never happened before that I haven't had a student say, well, I didn't know. It's never happened. And this was just with taking these practices and implementing them in a face-to-face classroom, providing that basic skeleton and structure. They don't ask because they know. And now they're familiar with it. And because they're familiar with it, they're more comfortable. Again, we're building trust. We're fostering a relationship. And I can see the relevance, absolutely, both online and face-to-face. So I'm a huge advocate for it. I didn't realize I would be. At first, I was like, oh, my gosh. And now I'm like, wow, this makes perfect and total sense. We've now just streamlined something that for so many students has been profoundly complicated. We took away the complication and created an opportunity for them to engage successfully in the material, which is what we're after to begin with, right? So, thanks.
Is there any questions for Heather? I will just chime in that when we started the QM process and we were going through things, you were thinking of it as a very big picture, as a chair, and getting a little overwhelmed with it all.
I was trying to figure out, like, how do
you do this?
And how do I convince people this is a good idea? Because I was still a little bit overwhelmed by what I was being asked to do.
But then as you sit and work with Angela and work through it, you realize
it's really not that scary.
No.
I mean, I think initially it feels like it, but it actually truly isn't not that bad. And it's really, I think the payoffs are really huge. I'm a huge advocate for it now.
All right, thank you.
So I think I know most of you. I'm Rochelle Gentos. I'm in the Social Sciences Division, and this is the second time I've done the online course development grant and been given that opportunity. And I'll kind of add to the chorus of QM, not only helping me in it's kind of invaluable in creating the structure of an online class, but it has also impacted my face-to-face classes as well. So I noticed when everyone was coming up with their titles that a lot of people were focusing on QM specifically. So you'll notice that mine is not directly on QM, and this is probably the longest title I've ever had in a presentation. But QM I view as kind of this structural glue that holds everything together, that allows you potentially to explore other ways of setting up your courses. And so for this second go around, I did my history of psych class. And this course is unique in that there's so much information, and you can kind of decide when the history of psychology starts. So I'm an experimental psychologist, and I wouldn't be one without actually talking about theory and research. So I'm going to talk about the theory, self-determination theory, that actually kind of fueled my decisions on what to present to you all here today. And then I'll describe how that actually applies to its manifestation in my class, and then actually show you what it looks like in my class. So those of you that might not have heard of self-determination theory, once I describe it, you're going to recognize it very quickly. So there's multiple components to this, and I'm just going to keep it simple. But Desi and Ryan talk about these different components to our well-being and our motivation and our want to actually complete a task. And people have this innate want and need for autonomy. And when that's impinged upon, we often do things just because we're told not to. There's a host of research that also shows that psychological reactivity. And so at least some of our activities as human beings need to be fueled by what's called intrinsic motivation, or something that's from within us. And so underneath this theory, there are two types of motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic. Just to give you some examples of extrinsic motivation, you're chasing the carrot, and this could be things like praise, money, punishment, or avoiding that. And then for our purposes here in terms of scholastics or academics, that high grade. I don't care if I actually retain the information, I just want the 98 out of 100 or whatever it is. Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is coming from within, and it's people doing things for the sake of actually feeling accomplished. They're innately curious, perhaps are actually interested in the content. They don't feel like they have to do it, but they're interested. They want to master it just for the sake of mastery, or they just enjoy it. And doing so gives them meaning. And so I use this theory in all of my classes to kind of pick and choose things that allow students some autonomy in what they do in the classroom. And so in college, we obviously have a specific sample of students that generally want to be here, right? We hope. So that's kind of funneling out some of these students that don't want to be here. But even so, we have students that differ in these kinds of motivations. And self-determination theory shows that with intrinsic motivation, you have better outcomes. So, for example, students will actually persist longer on tasks when they're given options. They feel more satisfied with the outcome. They're more engaged, and they actually report enjoying things more. They also show more globally decreased anxiety about working on tasks because that choice element is involved. Their well-being goes up, specifically in the domain that's of interest. And they also, as you might have guessed why I'm bringing this up specifically, have an enhanced academic performance. So one specific study that Patel and colleagues did in 2010, they had students choose the type of homework that they did within units, and that resulted by default in a higher intrinsic motivation. They wanted to choose it and then complete it with meaning. They also felt more competent while doing it, and thus their performance was higher. So in my classes, and y'all might notice this in your classes, you do some form of content or structure that allows your students a choice. But one of the things that I do is I do not take attendance in most of my classes. And I know we all differ in why we do that. But my view is that they're autonomous agents. I want them to be intrinsically motivated to be there. And that not only challenges me to be a better instructor, but it also, if they're there, I know they want to be there. So then I also do things like I offer them a freebie. If they want to just skip class one day, they get a free set of notes with all my notes on them, and they just request it and no questions asked. So that also gives them some autonomy if they don't want to be there, or if they want to come to class with the notes, they can do that. If I assign an assignment, I try to give them choices and say, choose a book from this list to do your book review presentation on. Or watch any movie, choose any concept. So all of those things encourage intrinsic motivation. You're not telling someone they have to do a specific set of tasks. And one of the things that I've always done for the last 10 years that I've taught is dropped the lowest test grade in some form or fashion. And so I initially started out allowing students that had an A to not take the test. And this is often common. And then I moved toward dropping the lowest test grade because I realized a lot of students, their test grades are very consistent, and what that does is it allows them the choice of not taking the final. And in addition to that, it also provides for a nice makeup policy, which is a little more clean cut, because I know with students, I can just say, well, that's your lowest test grade, it's dropped. So if they decide not to take test 2, they just don't show up. And so for my online class, I decided to explore this aspect of taking exams. And because of the flexibility that's afforded by the online environment, what I did is I offered more units than would probably be feasible to complete within a whole semester. And so I did not include this to intentionally overwhelm you, but this is a timeline from the front of a history of psychology textbook. And Hermann Ebbinghaus talks about how psychology has a very short history but a long past. And what we mean by that is, technically the word psychology wasn't used until about 1590 AD, but you can trace its beginnings all the way back to the Greeks. And so the history of psychology is not just, a history of that specific field, it's also a history of science. And so I switched textbooks while prepping my online class. And this one circled area has a whole nother 2 pages of material expanded on. And so most textbooks start with Descartes around 1596 with his birth and move forward from there. And the textbook that I had used did start with the Greeks, but it really skipped around and skipped over some other important information. So the text that I chose is very thorough and goes all the way from the Greeks to the present time. And so what I chose to do is offer my students choices about what units that they would complete. Because in the in-person class, I would try to fit all that I could in, and I'd always have to skip over big chunks of information or whole units or whole chapters, and that was never ideal. So what I did is I created 6 different units, and instead of having specific times where these students have to finish those items or those chapters, I allow them to drop 2 test scores, and so they have to choose 4 of these units out of the 6. So this is the first time I've ever tried to drop 2 out of a total, and so I also wanted to maintain some control over this, so I tell them in this blurb, I realize that it's probably small for some of you on the back, but they have to take at least 2 tests by midterm, and that's just me kind of making sure that they've hit a waypoint. So if a student's really, really motivated and they want to take all 6 tests, then they can. Or if they say, yeah, well, I'm not really interested in rationalism, I'm going to not do that unit, and they can just skip over it. And even if they skipped over 2 of these units, they still would get a fairly coherent picture of psychology as a whole. And so that's what I chose to do in my online class. I'm not really sure how it's going to work out. So if y'all have comments or suggestions or things that you might think would help me make this structure, this intrinsic motivation focus work, I'm all ears. That's it.
Any questions for Michelle?
I just have a design note.
Yes.
On that page, if you take the notes and put them at the top, somebody uses screen reader.
This one?
That'll make it a little easier on them.
Okay.
They don't have to scroll the whole thing to get to the
Awesome. So that's actually a picture that I have as a picture, and then it's also in the syllabus, but definitely, I wish I would have brought my pencil up here. I will remember to do that. Thank you.
I have a question, how you're going to manage your side of grading. If you have them doing these tests at all different times, and like how soon will they get their feedback?
Yep, that's a thing that I considered. So I'm pretty much just gonna, on a rolling basis, be grading them, constantly. Which honestly for me is much more feasible with grading because I teach 2 writing intensive classes every semester, and just thinking of that mound of grading. Some of y'all can relate. It's often hard to tackle it when it's that big. So for me, feasibility-wise, it actually seems much more manageable if I'm just kind of grading them as they come in. So, which is a good point. Yeah, it's gonna be a new adventure.
Yeah, you might have to do a follow-up.
Yeah.
How it goes.
And I wish I could implement some of these like statistics tracking things in some way to see, because anecdotally, when I ask my students about dropping the tests, they love it. They really give me positive feedback. Whether or not it's helping them, quantitatively will be seen. But other questions? Wait.
How do you think this would work on a science-based class? Just concept upon concept upon concept.
Well, as you know, most of the time those things build on one another. So obviously history does build on itself. So I'm hoping that there might be gaps in their knowledge, but I'm thinking of my research methods class is teaching how to, create knowledge via science. I I think there'd have to be more linearity, and you might have to require certain tests. I think it would still work. And I still do, like I said, in all my classes, I drop the lowest test grade. And some students, they might still come to class, they just won't take the test. But as far as the online format for classes that directly bill and you have to know the previous knowledge, I don't know. It's a good question.
Any other questions for Michelle? Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Thinkatorium. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Douglas Cruthers, and I'm an online instructor for the Business Division. For my Quality Managers Training course, I chose Business 370 Product Operations Management, or POM. This course is oftentimes difficult for business administration students, but must be completed for their degree. The course is centered around numerical analysis and quantitative reasoning. I have been told several times in the past by students that if it wasn't for the math, this would be a great class. I feel the same way about calc. When I was a student taking online courses, one thing stood out to me, that the lack of communication between the instructor and myself. I now find myself as an instructor role, and that lack of communication still stands out to me. An analogy once related to me equated online teaching to staring into a black hole. This is a perfect analogy for communication in typical non-quality matters courses, as oftentimes in online courses it feels like you're talking into a black hole because you're not always sure what students are really taking in. In live classes, you can see the understanding on their faces and the confusion in their eyes, Online, you're never quite clear what's landing and what is not. Over the summer, I had the privilege of engaging in Quality Matters training. After the training, I have a new outlook on communication in online courses and several new tools to help with the black hole of communication. Today, I'd like to share with you my new outlook on communication, some of the tools I have utilized in my course to facilitate communication, the student reaction so far this semester, and finally my thoughts on future development of communication in my online course. Before, my main view of online communication with students was to utilize Blackboard announcements and connect by email. As naive as this may sound, it seemed logical at the time. After completing the Quality Matters training course, I now realize that every time you post in your class, it is a type of communication. While email and announcements have their place in online education, they are a small fraction of the communication tools available. There are three major tools I utilize for communication in online courses: introduction videos, assignment instructions and feedback, and course assignment. To begin my POM course, students are encouraged to watch 3 5-minute videos or less. You can see them here. The first video is an overview of assignments in the course. The overview includes grading structure and reasoning behind each assignment. The second video shows students how to navigate the course and where each of the assignments will be located each week. Also, how to go back and check your grades on the assignments. The final video gives a closer look at the 2 larger assignments in the class, specifically going over what is expected to earn an A and the grading rubrics. Other than the information they relate, the videos have several other purposes. First, they allow students to see me and get a sense of my personality and style. As a solely online teacher, I have to prove that I'm not just a computer. This also gives them an insight to my sense of humor that is sprinkled all over the course. Second, these videos give the students a visual and verbal overview of the course assignments, and generally how the course is designed. The communication is important for the fundamentals of the course and helps students to see how assignments are utilized and graded. This also gives them a virtual tour of the course for easy navigation. Finally, there is also an additional way to students to understand the syllabus. In a live class, much of this is covered on the first day. These videos are a way to make sure that the same information is communicated to all students. It also can help with understanding as they are given this information in several different medias. Another communication tool is the assignments themselves. Clear and complete instructions are the first step in communication. This seems to be one of the ever-adapting areas of QM, clear and complete instructions. Assignments are never quite as clear as you think they are. To overcome this ambiguity that can plague online assignments, QM recommends giving a general overview of all assignments, detailing the logic behind the assignments and the general directions. Then for each individual assignment, give more detailed instructions, including what is deliverable to you, like my example here. Also including rubrics is a great way for students to gather deeper understanding of what is required in the assignment. Once assignments are turned in, feedback is a great communication tool. For minor and weekly assignments, I will give feedback through the Blackboard system. Many times, this centers around what the students did correctly, as well as what they need to improve on. However, for more in-depth assignments, I try to give individual feedback over email. This includes comments with the assignment, also general thoughts on the assignment, and places they can improve on. While this may not be exactly what QM means by learner interaction, it is one of the few ways I have found to establish an individual connection with the students. This feedback also seems to inspire students to communicate with me more over email, helping to illuminate the black hole of communication. This semester, students have commented on the course. Comments have been centered on the layout and the accessibility of the course. Students have said that material and assignments are very easy to find. They also like how the format is consistent each week. Utilizing email feedback, I have also been able to talk with students more and have had more communication with students during this semester than I have in the past. Most importantly, there seems to be an uptick in the grades. This is significant because the course content did not change drastically, just the presentation. For me, this is a greatest sign that I am beginning to breach the black hole of communication, and with a bit more work may be able to find another analogy. Going forward, some of the changes I will implement to continue to help communication are a syllabus and introduction video quiz. This way I can ensure every student is at least downloading the syllabus and letting the introduction videos play in the background. As I'm getting better and faster at creating videos, I would like my weekly check-in to be in video form. This is another way for students to connect with me and perhaps make the class feel less online. Finally, I'm going to incorporate an online study group system for the course to help students who want to study with other students, utilizing some tools in Blackboard to create a virtual classroom where students can post questions about the assignment, live chat, or access me for help. Quality Matters was a great learning experience and opened my eyes to a new way to navigate the black hole of communication that can happen here online. Learning how to format the course in an easy, navigable way and make the most out of every class is having a positive effect on the learning environment that takes place in my online POM class. Thank you. And I think the person in the back has a question.
Hi, Amy Minervini, and I teach composition courses. But also we've got that new exciting sports writing kind of major going on, and it's sports media studies with the interdisciplinary aspect of it, which is just super exciting. So thank you guys for allowing that to happen. And one of the core kind of courses is going to be basically like a news writing course, multimedia storytelling. I think they changed the of it for next semester. But one of them is this one, and I wanted to do something. I don't want to wax too philosophical about the state of journalism these days, because we know it's very interesting and it's changed so much over the course of the years. In some ways, very positive with the inclusion of all the digital stuff, and just we have so much information, of course, just at our fingertips and on all of our different social media platforms that we use. But on the other hand, too, we also have this extreme sort of bias in kind of both all directions, and it's a little, disturbing to see your discipline that you love kind of changing in that way. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to I wanted to try the tool, the adaptive release tool. I had used it probably like 10 years ago and hadn't really used it since, and so I thought it would be a really interesting way to ensure that students were really mastering the content. And the particular content that I wanted them to make sure that they were really good at was the hard news story, because we know that, I'm going to teach them that, of course, it really is that foundational news story that every journalist needs to use and to write. And so the course is just set up into just these different types of or kind of modules. And I tell them at the beginning about the course structure that, every week there's going to be, a new folder will open up. Typically, I just try to open them up 1 week at a time. But I do tell them that the one exception is week 4. So week 4 is, or week 3 is, or is it week 4 would be set on the adaptive release? Okay, I'm not sure on the wording of that. But during week 3, their news article is due, and I just said it's, of course, that foundational aspect of any media writing. And until the article is written to sort of these strict specifications, the week 4 folder won't open up. So they will be able to get as many times as they want to write that article, but until it reaches a 95% threshold, that week 4 folder won't open up. So what it would kind of look like here is they'll get to week 3, and then I do put in kind of informational item. Week 4 will appear after completion of week 3 work meeting proficiency. And if we click into week 3 here, this is kind of what they'll get. So they get an overview of what to kind of expect, what readings to do, and then what activities they're going to be required or to do, these learning objectives. And one of them, of course, is that submitting that news article. And then I said down here, because I do want to be as supportive as possible and encouraging, because that can be a little intimidating to students. Oh my gosh, the next folder is not going to open up. Is my whole semester going to be lost, right? I just said, don't worry if you don't meet that 95% threshold. This module assignment is designed to give you the practice, feedback, and support you need to be able to craft an unbiased hard news story, the bedrock of journalism. It may take multiple tries, and that's okay. Your week 4 assignments will have flexible due dates to allow you the time to master the content. So I just try to reassure them that, this is all part of the learning process. And in the previous week, they get a little bit of the news story or the hard news story background and readings. And so then really in this case, they're able to put it into practice. What do they get? So I have put a few sort of reminder videos what a hard news story should entail. I also make sure to put in the media bias. So it's really interesting link on just the different strategies to presenting that unbiased or balanced story. And then of course they would click on the actual assignment here. And then I do just have a separate link with the grading rubric, although it is sort of integrated in here as well. So if they click in here, they'll see that it's worth 100 points. And then again, the different things that are required, including, it has to be a certain length, it has to have the different structure of a news story, and then of course the content should be factual based, unbiased, and include proper attribution. And then how do I see the rubric? Oh, to view the rubric, I just click it here, okay. And so then the rubric would come up. And so it's just, again, I've just kind of pulled from the guidelines and just made the rubric based on that. So just the headline, word count, supporting details, the who, when, where, why, how, the inverted structure, the lead, and then of course your spelling and grammar conventions, formatting as well. So they can only miss 5 points, which is pretty, that would just be honestly like maybe a formatting error, maybe something was capitalized that shouldn't have, or vice versa, or maybe a comma is missing, or maybe they put a comma in, journalistic style, doesn't use that many commas. Maybe there might be a typo or maybe one word misspelled, and that would be it. I mean, everything else has to be, to that excellent standard. I think that's what I have at the beginning, at the top there. So, or maybe they single spaced it and it should have been double, or whatever the case may be. Maybe they didn't have a verb in the headline. So it has to be, it's very kind of exacting standards, but I think that's what we should require. So that's kind of why I made that at 95%, because I don't want students to think, oh, well, if I have like a couple of spelling errors, that's why newspapers, do retractions, or if you misspell a person's name wrong, we have people that are, we have these like couch researchers that will like cyber stalk you, if they think you are the person in this article or something. So I do think those standards need to be high. So that's kind of what I did. Now I went to, just really quickly here, let's go back in. I did purposefully make the week 4 content not heavy in terms of load. So notice it says enabled adaptive release there, so it would show up only when that happened. And then it's just kind of a new, different style, Wall Street Journal style, which is, again, one of the typical types of styles that you could use. And it just has some readings, a discussion board, and then the assignment itself is just taken from the book. They have, the article is already written for them. And then all they need to do is just use the information and put it into that Wall Street Journal. So they don't have to create anything new. And I just wanted to have that time in case it took 2 weeks to actually write that news article. So, and these dates would be flexible. Of course, I changed the dates to kind of match that open-ended sort of thing. So that's it. Okay, thanks.
So Amy, for your hard news story, did the students find their subject, or do you direct them?
I just asked them to please find their subject. I wanted them to, for example, if a student is maybe interested in criminal justice, they should probably, I try to direct them to find topics that would be in the areas that they are most interested in. It's kind of the same for the sports. If you're a kinesiology movement, pick your own. Yeah, is that? I'm hoping that's okay.
Great.
Thank you. I don't know how to log out.
Any other overall thoughts or comments before we disperse today? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Have you used the 95% cutoff in your face classes as well?
I haven't. No. It'll be the first time teaching it, so I don't have that.
I'm just curious how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
Not to be negative, but
That I think once they'll see, all the different things I'll point out, hopefully they'll make those corrections, and then I would think it's going to take at least 2 or 3 tries for each student.
So this is you self-correcting it, or there is a tool that's self-correcting?
I'll probably say, give them some guidance. Yeah, on that. Without rewriting it for them. I don't want to do extra work. Okay.